Very important to think about where you're siting your rain garden. We don't want to site a garden very close to a building if it's got a basement. You don't want to be sending water down, a lot of water down where there's a basement space underneath. And it also needs to be at least 25 feet away from a septic system or a well. Those are Department of Public Health regulations. We want to generally avoid areas that have bedrock very close to the surface. If we're trying to sink water into the ground, it's not going to sink in if there's bedrock there. We want to also avoid a seasonal high water table area. So this is probably the most common misconception that I hear about. People say, oh, we have a wet area of the yard or the schoolyard. It's the perfect place for a rain garden. It's actually the worst spot. If it's got standing water for a lot of the year, water can't sink in. That's telling you the water's not sinking in there. So we don't want to put a rain garden there. It's not a wetland. And we generally try to avoid real steep slopes. Like a little slope is okay, but like, for example, the steep slope that's over here, I would say no way. This one over here, maybe we could manage that with a little bit of a berm or a small retaining wall. It gets a little challenging with the slopes. Try to avoid that if possible. So getting water to the garden. So typically what we're doing, as you saw in some of those pictures, we're intercepting a downspout leader. In this case, the pipe came out from underground here. We distributed that water in the garden. Here's a small retaining wall. I would say it was about an equivalent slope to what's right here. So you can see that example right there. Other times, we have a downspout that's right next to the building. Here, we put a stone channel in to get that water out into the garden because we had a basement underneath there. There's that finished garden that we showed in other student projects. In many cases, especially at schools, we're going to be working along the edges of parking lots or roadways. So the typical way, I mentioned this before, is to make some sort of curb cut that allows the water to get in. So here, that water can come in through various cuts and get into the garden. And this is just an example shown from another perspective. So recently, the sizing guidance has changed based on the fact that I told you before that we're getting more intense storms now. So the guidance used to be a 1-inch storm. So basically calculating the amount of runoff that came from that drainage area for a 1-inch rain event. Now DEP has increased this to 1.3 inches. So they've increased that by 30% given the changes that we've seen in precipitation historically, looking backwards. So this captures the majority of events, 80 to 90%. The typical storage depth of a rain garden is about 6 inches, but that can be adjusted depending on the needs of the site. So different methods to get the drainage area. So the Luddite or the caveman method, you can do this with a simple tape measure outside. Google Maps, I already showed you how to do that map measurement. So you right-click on it and measure distance, and you can measure the area of that watershed. There's also a tool on the Rain Garden website, which I'll show you in a second. Also in the app. So the simple method, we'll start with the most basic here. We need to figure out how much roof is draining to the area where we want to put the garden. So in this particular example, this section of roof was about 580 square feet. This little section also contributed to that downspout, so we add that in. And then this section of driveway also contributed because we wanted to put the rain garden in that island here. So we add these up. It's about 960 square feet. That's the watershed or the drainage area. Again, typically sized to contain 1.3 inches of rainfall and a depression 6 inches deep. If you're doing this the manual way, you divide your square footage by the depth of your rain garden in inches. So if it's a 6-inch deep garden, 960 divided by 6 times 1.3, so that 1.3 inches is 208 square feet. So that's how big your rain garden should be. Treat that area. On the NEMO Rain Garden website, in addition to a sizing calculator, which I'll show you, there's also information about the soils. You have to have some sense of what the soils are on your site. If you've got poorly drained soils, for example, this is not where you would want to put a rain garden. So this a little tool that's on the website pulls one feature out of there, the drainage class from the NRCS soils layer. So you can zoom in on your site with an address finder and see whether it's poorly drained or well drained or extremely well drained, that sort of thing. That NRCS data give you a good rough estimate of what to expect on your site. But that can vary if you've had a lot of vehicle traffic, or if you've had even foot compaction causing compaction in your soil. So we usually encourage people to do a quick soil infiltration test. So dig a hole a foot deep, fill it up with water. If you come out the next day and there's still water in it, it's probably not a great spot for a rain garden. Or if you dig it and there's already water in it and you haven't put any there, it's not a great spot for a rain garden. The plants that are recommended are what we call facultative wetland plants. Perhaps you know about these because you teach this, but these are ones that are found around the outsides of wetlands naturally in this area. So these are not ones that are in the middle of the wetland. These are not plants that like to be wet all the time. So they can have wet feet sometimes, but they also like dry periods at other times. So I'll give you some of those examples shortly. So again, here's that website that's got lots of information on there. I'll show you that sizing calculator shortly, but here is the app. So also in the app, it's all the same information that's in the website. So it's a mobile site. You can just, you can scan the QR code if you'd like, or go just type that, the URL into your browser there. So it has that soils data, as I mentioned before. Also got other short video clips in there, just highlighting various things. The sizing tool that's in here, it will pull up the Google imagery of your site. And in that, you can tap out on the drainage area. So if we wanted to do one for this roof, you could outline the area of that roof. It will tell you how big it is and how big the rain garden should be. So it takes even those simple calculations out. One note on this, we've been trying to update this to the 1.3 inch. It's still currently just using the 1 inch sizing method. So you'll need to bump that up if you do use that. And then it does have the full plant list for Connecticut rain gardens in here. And there's detail in there. You can select various things for those plants: sun exposure, bloom color, and the type of plant. So the layout of the plants, this is ultimately up to you. So you want to think about this the same way you would think about any other landscaped area. So thinking about plant height and where you're viewing it from. You don't want big plants blocking out smaller plants, that sort of thing. If you've got a lot of deer, you might want to avoid plants that the deer like, that sort of thing. And don't be afraid to ask for help on the plants if you have a brown or black thumb. Not everybody has a green thumb, that's okay. And I'm sure you have friends that would be happy to help on this. So just a few examples here. These are ones that we've had really good success with in rain gardens. New York ironweed, it's a really nice plant. And I mostly chose it because I like purple flowers, but it happens to do really well in rain gardens. Winterberry is another really nice plant. This is a woody shrub, so it may not be appropriate for all applications, but if you do have a place where you can use woody shrubs, this is a nice one. Multiple benefits, has a nice wildlife benefit, allowing the birds to eat those berries all winter. Switchgrass, this is another very hardy plant that does very well in rain gardens. So there are many varieties of these. So this happens to be called Ruby Ribbons. It was actually developed up at UConn. Has some nice red streaks in there, but there are lots of different varieties of these. I will comment here that although these are native species in general, the ones that you're seeing here, so the ones that have these quotes after them, it means that they're a cultivar of that native species. So they've cultivated that native to have some sort of other characteristics. So in this case, it's got those red streaks in there. There are actually several different cultivars of those winterberry plants. Some are very large, some have more berries, some are compact. So they do that on purpose just for different applications. There are some people that only want the true native, and that's great too. It's hard to find just the straight native plant sometimes. So these cultivars are commonly available in many of our nurseries. I'll just mention that. And I do feel that they still have the good habitat benefit that the true natives have. New England aster, that's the one I showed you at that rain garden, or so the dairy bar rain garden. Very nice fall color on these. Permissions, this is another key thing if you're doing this with your students, making sure that from the beginning you're bringing in the administration to make sure that they're on board with this. Having somebody from the public works or the maintenance crew understand what's going on there, what it is, bringing them in early avoids conflicts down the road. Offering to help with the maintenance goes a long way. So the maintenance crew, in many cases with the municipalities, we get resistance because they're short-staffed, they don't have enough, they have too much work to do for the amount of people that they have, and they don't want something new. So yeah, go ahead. Very good question. What kind of maintenance does it need? I will get to that in a second. So I'm not going to go into this too much. Sometimes it does need to go through wetlands. If it's not, certain places in town, that's probably not going to apply for you. And that's not really appropriate here. So prior to installation, you would want to mark out the area where you would be installing. If you're doing any kind of heavy equipment, there's an excavator or backhoe or anything going in, if it's a bigger garden, you are required by law to call before you dig. Even if you're just doing handwork though, it's recommended to call before you dig to locate any potential utilities. Planning for labor is also important. You have a variety of labor sources at your disposal, and your students, hopefully. But other people's town or private homeowners, for example, it can be a lot of work, a lot of material to move out of there to dig that garden out. So you need to plan for that. I do like to get creative with the labor. We have done a lot of these at schools. I love putting the kids to work. I really don't even mind putting a girl on crutches to work. Listen, hey, this is all character building stuff here. So it was actually a really fun little project. We had the students come out. This was a 4th grade class, I think. Yeah, 4th grade. They came out in waves, and each of the kids got to put a plant in or something like that. It was a lot of fun. Also very important, now that you're going through this little crash course here, perhaps this can be your task. Typically, this is what I do. All right, I am the supervisor on these jobs, so I get the nice job of sitting with my Hawaiian shirt and my fruity drink. It is an old picture, as you can see, because there's a lot more hair in that picture. So we've marked it out. We've called before we dig. Now we're stripping off the grass. So again, this was a master gardener workshop, so we had a lot of hands there, but this can be backbreaking work. So at a school, this is not necessarily an easy job to do, even for a small garden. If you see this big dumpster in the back, you'll see now we've taken the soil out. That little dumpster was full. The town used that somewhere else, but it's a lot of material. At that last one where I was with the 4th graders, we were trucking it out in the back with wheelbarrows, and I was sore at the end of the day. But it's just something to think about. So we're excavating that soil down so we have area for the water to pool up in there. This is just a cross section of what we're doing. Sometimes a slight berm is necessary. If it's not steep enough where you need a retaining wall, we can use a small earthen berm. So this was another workshop we did in Hartford. The soil that we dug out of the bowl, we pushed it down to that low side. We used the grass that we dug out of there, immediately put it on the berm to help keep it intact and reduce potential for erosion. And then we lay out the plants. This is another workshop we did in Hartford. If you can do bigger plants, it makes it look nicer from the beginning, but it's more expensive. So sometimes people opt for the smaller plugs on a big project to save money, but it takes a little longer for it to get established and look nice in that scenario. So in this situation here, when we're laying out the plants and putting them in, again, this is just like any other landscaped area where you're thinking about how they're going to look and the spacing, that sort of thing. In this case, you also may want to add some compost around these plants when you're putting them in, because we've dug down into those lower layers of soil that have a little less organic matter. It will help these plants at least get established. They're not going to need fertilization once they're established, but this can help get them established. The mulch that we put in here now is a thin layer of the finely shredded mulch. It doesn't matter if it's hardwood or softwood. The important thing is that it's that finely shredded type. You want to avoid the bark nuggets, like the pine bark nuggets. they float up when the water actually fills that garden. So again, here's that one of the student projects. Here they are finishing up with the mulch. Here we have a little time lapse for you of that garden we installed in Haddam. So we had to get the water underneath that driveway, stripping off the grass. We had a lot of hands that day, and there's a lot of wheelbarrows going back and forth, digging out the soil. It is Connecticut, so there's rocks. Okay, I'm used to that. We use the rocks as a feature in there. We're laying out the plants, digging the plants in, spreading the mulch. Voila, here it is just from another perspective. I make it look really easy in this little video, but it's not an overly complicated process. But even for this small garden, I mean, this was a full day with 6 people out there doing a fair amount of physical labor. So it's just something to keep in mind. So your maintenance question. So everybody gets excited about the rain gardens. The students love this stuff. The schools love it. They like to get this in the media, and everybody's smiling when the rain garden's completed. And then a year goes by, and everybody got busy. And then somebody takes a swing around, like somebody like me, and wondering what that rain garden looks like after a year. And everybody's forgotten it, and it's got invasives in it, and the water can't get in anymore. And so it's a problem. So maintenance in the first few months is just like any other landscaped area. We want to water the plants as necessary just to get them established. We're looking for weeds and invasives early on too to make sure they're not getting a foothold. But the key thing early on is making sure we don't have any erosion issues. So this stuff, when addressed early, it can be fixed. If nobody's checking on this, like in a year, you come back and you see this happening. So this is what we want to avoid. And this should have been addressed in the design, at the design phase, but nevertheless, it happened. Once it's established on an annual basis, inspecting for weeds and invasives, the plant size and shape, it's really up to you. They don't need to be pruned. You can leave them grow wild. You can trim them. It doesn't matter. You can remulch annually if you'd like, or use a vegetative ground cover, but make sure that the storage is maintained. You don't want to fill it up with mulch. This is another common thing that happens. You want to make sure it doesn't get filled with mulch. Make sure the water flow paths are still open. There's a couple of examples at UConn where we did not maintain them. So this garden got completely filled up with sediment. We had some students participating in a summer field experience, some high school students, and we renovated this one, helped bring it back to life. Here's another example. This was our first rain garden in 2004. It was in good shape then, but by 2014, there was a footpath because the shortest distance between the dormitory and the dining hall was where the students walked. It happened to be right through the middle of the rain garden. So that path got compacted. The water started running through there and right out the other side. So the garden was basically non-functional. So again, another batch of students that summer, we renovated that garden, put in some stone, and made it so that the water went in the garden. Turf dams are another issue. This is a maintenance issue. The grass tends to grow up and prevent the water from getting in. Something to check on an annual basis. And then I mentioned the over mulching. So we had this happen where the mulch was filled all the way up in there. And so that is it for the crash course in rain gardens. The other stuff that I told you about, these cookbook slides, I'll unhide those after and make those available if anybody wants them. That's how to calculate nitrogen and phosphorus reductions, that sort of thing. Any questions?
You're trying to find out if your roof is strong enough. How can you begin to go about that?
So if you're trying to find out if your roof is strong enough to support a green roof, I would talk with the facilities at the building first, and then they may work with the town, like a town engineer, to have a structural engineer evaluate it. What we try to recommend is for places where the students can see it and interact with it. So if you've got like a section of roof that they can actually see or walk out on, that's ideal. So that would be a good place to target. Other questions? Say again? So plant list for wetlands or vernal pools? No, that's different. So these are outskirts of wetlands. There is one of my extension colleagues has a like a buffer plantings list. I don't know if that would be a wetland plant list or not. There might be one in extension. If you Google UConn extension wetland plants, that might come up. It's not one of mine though. Yep. Did you have a question too, Abby? Okay. Okay. Other questions? Yeah.
Can these be successful in more forested areas? Like most of these have high forest area.
Can a rain garden be put in a forested area? Is that what you're asking? So basically, the main thing is you want to make sure it's taking some runoff from some sort of impervious surface. So like an example, maybe like we're talking here, if there was a spot for a rain garden here, it's basically right at the edge of the woods, I would probably select plants that are shade tolerant. That's really the only thing I would think about for that. Yeah, but they certainly can be put in there. It's really the sun shade exposure that you want to look at. All right, well, I'm happy to be a resource. If you have questions about this, send me an email. It's not on that slide somewhere, but I do have some handouts actually that talk about how to look at like residential disconnection. So for rooftops, driveways, et cetera. You've got the Rain Garden app. There's also a guide for residential fertilizer applications that relates to non-point source pollution. So I'll leave those here. That's it. Thanks, everybody.